oh, this is not living. You need to live eating and drinking and smoking and partying all the time, and that's life.
I don't think you have to choose between enjoying life and being healthy. I think you have to find common ground so you can achieve both.
Is there a reason you're still working on the mice?
Worms and flies and mice were the model organisms for research, and now billionaires are the model organisms for research. We don't need to do anything for people until they have some chronic disease or some condition. This is crazy. What do you do about it? It's nice to know your biologic age, but you'd like to figure out a way to lower that biologic age. I don't think we're like a car where we can just put new tires on. We're not a plug-and-play body. If you put another organ in and the environment around that organ is still old, that organ is going to age really quickly. I can't even understand why. I mean, this is the only thing that happens to everybody that walks into your doctor's office is they're getting older, and the doctors aren't taught anything about that.
I'm Dr. Esra Çavuşoğlu, and I've been living a sober life for the past 20 years. My battle with addiction drove me to seek new methods, devices, and supplements to improve my physical and mental performance, enhance my quality of life, and ultimately live healthier for longer. From my experiences in addiction recovery, biohacking and longevity, to the latest global developments, from groundbreaking entrepreneurs to expert academics, the conversations I've had over the years are now featured weekly on Soberhead Podcast. Welcome to Soberhead Podcast. Today, we bridge the gap between academic labs and real-world clinical translation with a monumental figure in geroscience, Dr. Brian Kennedy, former CEO of the Buck Institute and current director of the Center for Healthy Longevity in Singapore. In this episode, we move past mouse models to explore why billionaires are the new model organism of research. Dr. Kennedy explains the hidden dangers of supplement stacking, warning how we can accidentally oversuppress our cellular pathways, much like Brian Johnson did. We dive deep into the grand conductor of metabolism and aging, the mTOR pathway, alongside the groundbreaking clinical trial aimed at delaying menopause to extend female health span. We also break down why commercial biological clocks fail and how Singapore is leading a $300 million initiative to treat aging from cradle to grave. Üniversiteyi sadece dersler, vizeler, finaller olarak düşünme. Asıl mesele okurken kendini keşfetmek, üretmek, projelerde yer almak ve mezun olmadan gerçek dünyayı tanımaya başlamak. Bir yandan psikolojiyle insanı daha iyi anlayabildiğin, beslenme ve sağlık bilimleriyle iyi yaşamanın ne demek olduğunu öğrendiğin, mühendislik ve yönetim bilişim sistemleriyle teknolojiyi, veriyi ve sistemi çözümleyebildiğin bir üniversite düşün. Yani sadece bilgi aldığın değil, düşündüğün, ürettiğin ve fikirlerini hayata geçirebildiğin bir yer. İstanbul Gedik Üniversitesi, öğrencilik hayatını gerçekten yaşarken geleceğini kurabileceğin bir deneyim sunuyor. Ayık Kafa'nın daimi destekçisi Gedik Eğitim Vakfı'nın sağladığı katkı ile size dünyanın önde gelen uzmanlarını konuk olarak getirmeye devam ediyoruz. Siz de Ayık Kafa'ya abone olarak destek verebilirsiniz. Dr. Brian Kennedy, welcome to Soberhead Podcast. This is going to be a very important episode for us, for whole Turkey, because everybody knows the confusion in between very extreme longevity interventions and the mice studies and biohackers considered like me popping bunch of pills together. You're there to set the stage correctly so that people would be able to improve their health span. And when I look to your incredible achievements so that my audience would know, you're in this dream team of the geroscience inventors in a way. You were in the first discovery for the sirtuins, you discovered the mTOR pathways. There's this new now alpha-ketoglucarate that you're working heavily on it. You're the former Buck Institute CEO and president. I cannot stop counting. And
That's okay, you can stop.
No, but I want the audience to know because Turkish people are not really aware what's happening in the world, very much so I'm bringing the science. But more importantly for me, what you're saying, I heard you at the conference and in a couple of interviews that you made, you say that, in the lab, we're not able to, whether by financial reasons or ethical reasons or, permissions, what the clinics are already intervening people with the means who can do these interventions. So you're trying to make this bridge, this link in between the lab to the real life. Did I describe correctly?
Yeah, you did. And first of all, thanks for inviting me. Turkey is one of my favorite places to visit, so I'm only unhappy I'm not there in person.
Oh.
I make the joke that it used to be that worms and flies and mice were the model organisms for research, and now billionaires are the model organisms for research. Because not only billionaires, but people that have means are going to these longevity clinics and doing all kinds of interventions. And the interesting thing about these clinics is they're clinical practice, but they're also like research at the same time. And so we're trying things at these clinics that are not fully validated. And that creates, some nervousness because it's possible some aren't safe, but it creates exciting data because some of these interventions are extremely expensive and almost impossible to do in an academic setting. And if we work with clinics, we can understand what they're doing, see the data, and identify, strategies that are actually making people younger.
It's very confusing for us, for people who are not really in your settings, that, you say, Matt says, like a bunch of you says that the rapamycin and the mTOR pathways and stuff, and there's a whole other also highly respected people are still in the metformin and antioxidants. So like, it's very confusing for us, for the end user, this whole debate in between you guys.
Well, I think it's confusing for us too at some level, because we don't all have the answers. We have sort of our knowledge and our intuition, and so we tend to believe different things. First, I would say that these things are not mutually exclusive. Both metformin and rapamycin may be good for you. And in fact, there's data in mice that combining them has a synergistic effect. I think the data on rapamycin and the mTOR pathway is the most robust because if you modulate the activity of that protein, mTOR, with rapamycin or some other strategy, it extends lifespan almost everywhere it's tested across a range of species in a lot of different labs. Some things one lab has trouble repeating what another lab does, but rapamycin is very robust. And there's already human data that's accumulating that looks good. So it may not, at the end of the day, be the best intervention, but right now I think there's the most evidence for it.
When I was doing my researches that showed that you're doing human trials on rapamycin and you're able to see great improvements. But also what I hear from you is that throwing in a bunch of interventions, bunch of supplements or repurposed drugs and stuff, we don't know yet how they're going to interfere to each other in human biology. How are you regulating that for yourself and for your trials?
First, let me start with the preclinical data. We do a lot of mouse studies where we try to combine things together. So we take 2 or 3 or 4 things that all work on their own and put them together and see if you get an additive or a synergistic effect. And what we find is that, first of all, it's highly unpredictable. So we don't know before we test it what's going to work well with what else. But more concerning is sometimes when you put too many things together, you get adverse effects. So not only do you not have a small positive effect, but you can have a negative effect. And so that's why, first of all, I support hackers. And I think that empowering people to make their health decisions, and especially people that educate themselves in the field and decide what to do, I think that's great. But I worry when people are combining too many different things because we just don't know how they interact with each other. And I'll give you an example. Brian Johnson stopped taking rapamycin because he said it was hurting his biologic age. But he was also taking a number of supplements that also hit the mTOR pathway. And so you're taking many different things that hit the mTOR pathway from different angles. You might be turning that pathway down too much. I mean, you need to have some mTOR activation under certain situations. And so you can overhit a pathway by hitting it too many different ways. So I think that we don't know the answers to how to combine everything together yet. And people need to at least be aware of that when they're making their decisions. I can talk about myself too, if you want. I think that what I've done is try one thing at a time, or maybe 2 things at a time. I go on and off things. I measure. I think it's really important to measure. If you're going to spend money taking supplements for longevity, measure aging, measure your clinical markers like, the standard stuff, cholesterol, glucose levels, blood pressure. see if things are changing. And also pay attention to how you feel. Do you feel more energetic? Do you exercise better? Subjective things matter, especially in N=1 setting. So, you need to be aware of how you're responding to things as much as possible and look for things that are beneficial for you.
Let me jump in for a very quick second. If you can hear me right now, we know you're watching Soberhead. But are you subscribed? Could you check it for me? Very honestly, our subscriber count gives us real leverage when it comes to convincing the guests we invite to join the show. So, if you want to keep watching some of the best experts in their field right here, please subscribe to the channel. In one of your earliest discoveries that there was this mTOR pathway, and we also know, and there are also scientists out there that, I want to ask about protein and strength training and stuff because it's completely the opposite of suppress the mTOR pathways rather than it fuels in. How are you looking to these contrary approaches? Because one should then be making us more aging rather than making us strong and young and powerful.
So I don't think you want to have mTOR all on or all off. You want it on when it's supposed to be on and off when it's supposed to be off. And that's when you're young, that's what you have. So when you exercise, your muscles turn on mTOR, or when you eat, your liver turns on mTOR because you need to metabolize the nutrition. When you get a wound, your skin turns on mTOR to proliferate and heal the damage. And all that's good. We want that. But the problem is when you're resting and when you're young, the mTOR gets turned back off. And as you get older in a number of tissues, you can't turn mTOR back off again. So you have it on sort of at a bit high basal level all the time, and that's contributing to the inflammation. So I think the goal is to add rapamycin to a level that you can get the baseline back down, but still activate it when you need to. And I think that's one reason intermittent rapamycin works so well, because you turn down that baseline and it stays down for a while. But then the rapamycin wears off, and then you can exercise or do whatever and activate mTOR when you need it. So it's really about the dynamic range of the pathway, not all on or all off.
When you're taking, let's say, rapamycin, let's say, pulsing Sundays, so you should not do any activities or feed yourself turning on mTOR, so you just allow rapamycin to activate itself?
I wouldn't go that far, but I would say subjectively that I noticed that if I exercise within and I do a lot of exercise, I like muscle mass. I think it's good for aging. If I exercise within a 24-hour window after taking rapamycin, to me, it felt like it was harder to do. I wasn't getting the response that I wanted. It's subjective. I can't show you data on that, but that's just my perception. Whereas if I was exercising 4 or 5 days after taking rapamycin, then I was having great exercise and feeling great. So it may be true that there's an interaction there between when you take rapamycin and exercise, but there's not really large-scale data on that. It kind of makes sense, though.
Can you share a little bit the human trials? Because we knew that, the pulsing, the 6 milligram or 8 milligram once a week was tested on mice. And now you're doing the human trials. Is it the same amount that you're using?
Yeah, we haven't actually started the trial. We're doing it in the US yet on that, but we almost are ready to start. I think it's 5 milligrams once a week. We're in the middle of an AKG trial that we're actually getting ready to publish, which we can talk about later. And then there are a number of studies on rapamycin that are going on around the world. I think one of the most interesting ones is Yushin Si at Albert Einstein. Oh, sorry, she moved to Columbia University. She's working on giving rapamycin to women that are premenopausal, that are having low hormone levels, to see if you can raise hormone levels and slow ovarian aging. And I'm really excited to see what that trial looks like, because we know also in preclinical models that ovaries are among the first organs to age, and that rapamycin delays that aging process in mice and preserves fertility. If you can delay menopause with rapamycin, that's a huge benefit to women for their health span. And so I'm really excited to see what that study looks like. There's a number of other rapamycin studies going on for Alzheimer's and also for aging directly. So I think we'll get a lot of interesting data in the next year or so.
It's in my notes that you are the director. Are you still the director for Ca-AKG Asia Center for Reproductive Longevity and Equality?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting area. And, I did few interviews around women reproductive organ aging, and very loud voice now saying that, that is the center of everything for a woman. And when you get into the menopause, everything falls, which we know, but unfortunately, there's nothing yet to extend, I guess, the menopause symptoms or ovarian aging. So what are you guys doing on that?
I would say that, healthy lifestyle, maintaining weight, eating healthy, those things do help with menopause. But you're right, there are no drugs or sort of prescription that you can take to delay that. So one of the things we're doing is taking geroprotectors. So these are drugs or supplements that slow aging generally, and then going back and looking at, for right now, preclinically, to see if they preserve fertility and preserve ovarian function in mice and in other animal models. Once we find, and a lot of them do. So interesting, there's a lot of overlap between things that extend lifespan and things that preserve ovaries. And that may be for reasons you said, that ovarian aging, at least in females, is a big driver of aging generally. So the two things are very connected. So then the next step is to really get those into clinical studies and see if we can preserve ovarian function and delay menopause. I think that's a great goal. It's unfortunate that research in this area has been really delayed. I mean, the funding for this it's been very low. There's a lot of reasons for it, starting with the fact that in animal studies, like male mice tend to get disease faster than female mice. So if you want to do a high-fat diet study and look at diabetes, the males respond really quickly and the females more slowly. So if you're trying to do fast experiments, you tend to use males. But I also think there's a bit of a problem with too many Y chromosomes among scientists doing the experiments too. It was male-driven. When I started, it was mostly men doing the research, and they tend to look at male animals. And so now we've corrected that to a large extent in the animal research field. And hopefully we'll find interventions that are really working and get those tested, like rapamycin is being tested now, because I think we can have a huge effect on health span if we slow menopause.
I paid attention to something when I was in Dublin. It was my first time ever, and I felt like I went back to school, because these are almost like half of the presentations were gibberish for me. I felt so tired after that 3 days. My brain was fried. But, I learned a fair amount. What I paid attention is that there's some supplement companies out there that is like Timeline Nutrition for Urolithin A, and for some others, they are showing their proof that it's improving human muscle mitochondria, or now they're working on brain and etc. in inflammation. But you're still talking on mice. So is there a reason you're still working on the mice?
We do both. So we do human studies too, publish data on humans, look at a lot of human data analysis to try to understand aging, longitudinal studies, looking at everything from methylation to clinical parameters in humans. So we really do both of those, but there are still things you can do in animals that you can't easily do in humans. You need to understand whatever you're giving the animal safe first, and that needs to be done in the animal model. And also you can do experiments in animals that you can't do in humans. So you can, at the end of the experiment, you can harvest the tissues and look at molecular biology of each tissue. You can't do that in a human study. So to me, these two strategies complement each other. You learn things in humans, you take that back and understand the mechanism in animals, and then improve on the intervention and go back and test in humans. And to me, we get a lot further along by working synergistically together. But it is true that the human research is really picked up, largely because of AI and because of access to large data sets. I mean, previously it was really hard to get data sets on human aging, and now that data is more readily available. So that's great.
I want to come to calcium alpha ketoglucarate, because you drive that research and you say that it's really a very helpful molecule, but you also warn people that there should be a certain type of it. Not all type alpha ketoglucarate would do the same. Let me first ask, what does it do? Why it gets reduced in our system when we get old, and what does it help?
Well, first of all, before I start the conversation, I work with a company called Ponce de Leon Health that makes a product called Rejuven, so I have a disclosure to make.
All right.
AKG is one of the central metabolites in your body. It's if you're an aficionado, it's in something called the TCA cycle. So it helps convert nutrients like glucose into ATP in the mitochondria. And also AKG is very interesting because you can shuttle molecules off of that pathway and make proteins, through AKG as well. So it's kind of at this metabolic interface. It allows cells to adapt to their needs and change their metabolism. And this molecule declines with aging. I don't know that we completely understand the mechanisms by which it goes down, but it's very clear that it goes down, and it's actually a biomarker. When it's going down, that's one of the metabolites you can use to predict aging in animals. And so we found that restoring it preserves sort of cellular metabolism and helps animals stay healthy longer. And then we did some human studies, and the most recent one, which is real world data. It's not a completely placebo controlled trial, but we compared many different supplements, and by one methylation clock that measures biologic age, it reduced age by 5.7 years relative to the population. So it had a very big effect. So we're really encouraged by that. We believe that you mentioned the type of it is important, and we believe we use a time release version. So this doesn't dissolve right away. If you do that, the AKG gets used up mostly by the bacteria in your system. But this has a time release element, so it gets to your intestines and releases slowly over a 12-hour window. And it's a better way of getting AKG into your bloodstream. So I think we've seen evidence that works better than just taking the normal AKG.
Since you explained this, I want to ask again the conversation that we had a few minutes ago. So AKG works, Rapamycin works, you're working on NAD stuff as well, and then Urolithin A works. So how shall a human move towards these? Because all of it shows some promise.
Yeah, I think it does. I think, if you want to be a sort of start trying these supplements, I think there's pretty good safety data on all of them. I would pick one, start with it, see how things are changing, maybe add something to that or go off of that and try something else. So slowly build things up. You're doing aging. You don't have to have the perfect combination tomorrow. If it takes you a year to figure out the right strategy, that's okay. For me, I take in addition to the Rejuvenate, I take a sublingual NAD. And I found that those two things together, for me, improve my endurance performance. So I'm not 100% sure it's slowing my aging, but I know if I'm exercising better, I'm probably aging better. So I take those two things sort of religiously because for me, the two of them together are beneficial.
In my notes, there is also this AKG. Also, you did some work on the Alzheimer's, I guess, memory models, Alzheimer's. What is it? So that's the biggest problem of this time. So everybody's trying to find something.
Yeah, we noticed that this was in animal studies. We noticed that it preserves electrophysiology and long-term memory in older mice, which is really exciting. We didn't directly look at an AD model, but we did look at it improves electrophysiology in an AD model. We didn't do other parameters of that model. So we need to go back and do more studies, but I think it would be an interesting candidate to look at in a human Alzheimer's prevention study, or at least with people with early onset Alzheimer's disease, because the nice thing about AKG is it's extremely safe. It's on the generally regarded as safe list in the United States. Mm-hmm. There have been studies where you give many grams of this a day to people and there's no toxicity. So we feel very comfortable with the safety of the molecule. And even if it has a modest effect on Alzheimer's progression, that's still a huge benefit to people with a terrible disease.
You're also working some aging clocks, and you're also critical of clinics are using the commercial biological aging clocks to measure people's age. And I had similar experience as a Matt, because I tried the company with the same drop of blood into, and it was 10 years apart. What are these commercial clocks? What are they measuring, and why people should not really get excited about it because everybody has a good result for some reason besides me, who does so many interventions.
Well, therefore it can't be right. First of all, they use what's called DNA methylation, which is this is called measuring sort of the epigenetic control in your cells. So your genetic information is your DNA, but every cell has the same DNA, and you have to make proteins from that DNA. So how does one cell become a neuron and another cell become a muscle cell, etc.? And that's because some regions of DNA in the muscle cells are turned on and other regions are turned off. And the neurons, you turn on a different set of genes and they become neurons. And so how you pack the DNA and control it in the nucleus is through epigenetics. So in this case, you methylate the DNA. So you add a methyl group to certain regions of the DNA, and that helps organize the DNA. Now, for the purposes of today's talk, all we have to say is that methylation pattern breaks down with age. And so some sites that are supposed to be methylated become demethylated, and other sites that are demethylated become methylated. So you can measure those changes over time and predict a person's biologic age. So all of that makes sense, and we use those clocks in research settings in the lab. But they have a couple problems commercially. One is what you said, they're not very consistent yet. Mm-hmm. And I think the companies are doing their best. It's just that this procedure is not super easy to do. It's not like measuring your glucose levels, mm-hmm. which we know how to do accurately. Here, there's some noise when you do the epigenetic measurements. Also, people are sending their samples in from different places, and they're arriving under different conditions and used in different batches. There's a lot of difficulty in getting consistent data. The second problem with the methylation is this: say you get a number, what do you do about it? It's nice to know your biologic age, but you'd like to figure out a way to lower that biologic age. And right now, methylation is not very actionable. And we found that problem when we started working with clinics and hospitals. You talk to doctors and they're like, so what? You have 10 methylation sites that tell me you're 10 years older. What am I supposed to do to reduce that? And so we turned to using a different kind of clock. This is collaborators here, Jan Gruber and Feng Sheng here at National University of Singapore. And we decided to use those clinical parameters that are super accurate and that are actionable. So if you have, high LDL, we know what to do about that. Mm-hmm. And so we take 50 or 60 of those markers and we predict your risk-adjusted age. So if I say you're 50, that means you have the mortality risk of a 50-year-old. Don't worry, you're not 50, I'm sure.
I'm 55.
You're much
almost.
Younger. We look at which components are driving that risk, and we say, let's go in and target those components. So it may be you have slightly high blood pressure, or it may be something simple like your levels of vitamin B are too low or something, or too high or something like that. So it tells you not just what your age is, it tells you accurately because we're using accurate markers to make that prediction. And then it tells you what to do about it. So I think those kinds of clocks are more valuable clinically right now. The methylation clocks are very interesting for aging, and they're going to continue to evolve and get better. But right now, I'm worried that they're just not consistent enough.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. And I almost asked to everyone who's very much aware of this, because I see this huge rise also in Turkey about biological age testings, and I don't want people to spend their money for something that's really not accurate. And I don't want doctors also to get confused because, if they're not scientists like you, they can also get caught into this, this is measuring telomere length or biological age and so on and so forth, but we don't know what you can do with it. Where do you see this field is going? Because I know that you're more focusing to the health span rather than lifespan, because I think you know that we're not there yet to extend life anything further. I was listening to a podcast that you were in with Peter Attia. I think he made a great point saying that, when we look to people who are 110, they're very frail. I mean, they live. I mean, yeah, they can still cook maybe, but they're not like me or you. I'm not sure that if I want to live until 110 and not really doing much in life, When do you see that's going to be shifting? Do you even see it? Do you even see it's coming anytime soon? Let me jump in for a very quick second. If you can hear me right now, we know you're watching Soberhead. But are you subscribed? Could you check it for me? Very honestly, our subscriber count gives us real leverage when it comes to convincing the guests we invite to join the show. So, if you want to keep watching some of the best experts in their field right here, please subscribe to the channel.
I think another way to ask that question is, can we really change maximum life expectancy? Can we get people out to 150? Because those two things go together. You're not going to have 110-year-old super healthy people that all just suddenly die. If we keep those people alive and healthy at 110 playing tennis, they're probably going to live past 120 too. So I think that's a really interesting question. There's a big debate in the field right now. And if you look back to animal models, we can extend maximum lifespan. So we can extend the mouse lifespan by 30%. So you have mice that are at the age when all the control animals are dying, and they're still pretty healthy, and they live 30% more. But some of the data suggests, the human data suggests, that the interventions we're studying are going to what's called square the curve. So they get more people, it'll extend the median life expectancy, but maybe not the maximum life expectancy. That's a debate. Other people think that if you add enough things together, I think Aubrey would argue, DeGray would argue, that if you add a few things together that hit different pathways, it's going to be additive. None of us really know. We're all speculating. I will say that, Peter Fedichev, who has a company called Gero, that has done a lot of great data analysis, and he works with us now in US, and we're trying to find a different class of drugs that might really target maximum lifespan. Like, if we're really thinking about how do we get to 150, and I talk a lot about health span, I think, because I think that's what we can do now. But I'm not against extending lifespan either. I think that it's good to think about what might 150-year lifespan look like, because I think it's possible to get there. I don't know. I can't put a timeline on that. I think extending health span 5 or 10 years, I think we have tools to do that now. We just need to do the testing, the validation, figure out what works best in which people, and we can achieve that. I think for getting people to 150, I believe it's achievable, but I don't think we have a good grasp on what that timeline is right now.
There's this, I don't want to say rumor, but from longevity doctors, like one in Turkey, a couple of them in America, they got influenced so much with David Sinclair's work, and they keep saying this: hang in there for another 10 years and there's going to be a pill. Hang in there another 10 years, there's going to be a pill. What is that, hang in there and there's going to be a pill?
That's called a kind of escape velocity. It's something that Aubrey DeGray first started talking about, the idea that you can slow down aging at a faster pace than you're actually aging. So if you buy another 10 years, more developments come, and you buy more time, and eventually you're buying more time than you're actually aging. I think it's a really interesting concept, and it may be true. Again, it's really hard to put a timeline around that. I think David is, let's call him optimistic, but he does some really good science. I've known David Sinclair for decades, and we were in the same lab together, back at MIT a long time ago. But I think that, like, the reprogramming strategies that he's doing right now, it's certainly one of the most promising areas in the field, and they're testing testing in the eye right now, and I hope it works for regeneration in the eye. But I think that we just don't know how fast those kinds of strategies are going to be safe and effective. And so the good news is there are a lot of different technologies developing. The gene therapy technologies are very interesting. I'm not sure they're ready for prime time yet, but they're very interesting. Stem cell strategies are interesting, and a range of other things. So I'm confident there are going to be major discoveries going forward. Whether we're at escape velocity yet or in the next 10 years is still, I think, unknown.
It was such a great way that you put it out, saying that 10 year is like for more discovery. So if you stay kind of healthy, then we may be able to add another 10 healthy years to you. It's not like in 10 years there's going to be a pill for immortality. With you explained it in very simple.
Yeah, I mean, if I were trying to just focus only on my media presence, I would put timelines on these things. But the fact is, I'm guessing. I have some insight, but I don't know the answers completely. But I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic.
There are multiple also biotech companies out there that, I did an interview with a longevity investor, fund owner, builder, Serge, and he was mentioning like there are these labs that are growing organs, like kind of they're splitting the one liver into 50 pieces and then they're kind of doing some modification on them and then place them in you so that you will have a full-size liver grown in whatever timeline. And Aubrey was saying, actually, I did an interview with him as well, and he was saying that, I think the future, in order for us to be able to live longer or not die, it should be like a car changing the parts. The human organs should be replaced with a younger version of them.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we do organ transplants already when people have liver failure or their hearts are failing. And we've learned stuff from that. So now when we put a transplanted organ in, it's not a completely youthful organ. It's a donor from someone who's already, maybe they're middle age already. That's not exactly the same experiment that you're talking about, but it does teach us something. And what it's taught us is that we're not a plug and play body. If you put another organ in and the environment around that organ is still old, that organ is going to age really quickly. It's a combination of the actual tissue and the interface with the body. The blood is supplied, the other ways that it interacts with other parts of the body, the signaling molecules. And so I don't think we're like a car where we can just put new tires on. I think that we have to think a little bit more holistically about it and say that there is a process called aging in the body. It's systemic. And I don't think we're going to live a whole lot longer unless we do something about that systemic process. Now, there may be value to replacing organs too, but I think doing that in the absence of thinking holistically is going to have limited returns.
I want to now touch base on the advice that you guys give to longevity clinic, and also actually you, Dr. Meyer, and Professor Strauss in Israel, you guys are trying to actually extend that concept to public hospitals almost, so that instead of intervention when you have a heart attack or heart disease or brain disease, doing a prevention. When do you think that approach is going to change? Because I keep spreading the message that people need to go and do ongoing checkups and maybe MRIs and so on and so forth. And there's a really pushback, not only from the doctors, because they find it unreasonable and unnecessary to check your brain. Also, people are yet not ready for that. And a part of them are afraid to find out something. The other part of them think that, oh, this is not living. You need to live like eating and drinking and smoking and partying all the time, and that's life. When do you think that whole approach can shift, and what do we need to do for it?
There's two elements to that. One is that, there's been a perception in the medical field that prevention just doesn't work well. And so a lot of doctors are reticent to spend a lot of time with their patients talking about prevention. And it's true, it's hard to make lifestyle changes for most people. For a whole range of reasons, it's difficult to do that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't encourage it. You should be measuring things, you should understand your body, and you should be proactive about doing things to stay healthy. Now, I'm not saying be a vegan marathon runner. It's like I drink, for instance. It's something that I enjoy doing. I have to say I monitor my liver enzymes. I see what the effect of it is, and if I started getting in trouble with that, I would stop drinking. But I enjoy having a couple glasses of wine. So that's part of my life. And then, but at the same time, I don't smoke. I don't. I try to exercise well. I try to eat relatively healthy. I worry about stress management, things like that. So I look for the things I really, really enjoy doing, and then I still do them. But if there are things that are unhealthy that I don't enjoy and I can do healthier things, or that I'm neutral about doing healthier things, I will do that. And what I found is if you make incremental changes, to your life, healthy changes, they build your confidence up and they make you proud of yourself. And then you're capable to keep moving to the next level and get healthier and healthier and healthier. So I don't think you have to choose between enjoying life and being healthy. I think you have to find common ground so you can achieve both.
I know that you're not yet that convinced that alcohol zero policy is just healthier than 1 or 2 glasses of wine. How do you feel about this? Like, how do you think about the gut microbiome? Because the message out there is like alcohol is alcohol, therefore it's going to kill your gut microbiome with each glass.
I mean, I'll give you a general answer to this question.
Sure.
I feel like there's a huge amount of bias in this scientific field studying alcohol. There's some people that are convinced ethanol is good for your cardiovascular system. There are other people that believe the polyphenols in certain kinds of alcohol, like wine, are good for you. There's another set of people that believe that any drop of alcohol is, terrible for you. And there's some evidence supporting their claims, but I'm skeptical of everything right now. I think that one thing I know is you can extend lifespan of animal models with ethanol. And it's interesting. And ethanol is a carbon source too. You can make ATP from ethanol. You also make aldehyde, which is a toxicity. I suspect that what I tell people is it's probably very individual. If you're among the group of people that can manage drinking ethanol or alcohol at a very reasonable levels, because we know a lot of alcohol is bad, that's for sure. But if you can manage to drink alcohol at reasonable levels, that if you don't have liver problems, if you don't have risk of prostate or breast cancer in your family or any signs of it, it might be good for you. It might be protecting your cardiovascular system, might be reducing your stress, might be making you happy. If any of those flags I mentioned are up, though, you probably shouldn't drink. And so, look, longevity is personalized. Things that are good for some people are going to be bad for others. And we don't have all the answers to that yet. But I feel like the field around alcohol use is being driven by things that are often not scientific. That could be, ethics. It could be religion. It could be, alcohol producing companies. There's a lot of outside influence in that research, and it's made me to the point where it's really hard to know what to believe. So I kind of think the common ground there is what I said, that too much is definitely bad. A little bit might be good for some people. It might not be good for others.
This geroscience, let's say longevity in the public literature, has been very loud for the last 5 to 10 years. Before that, everybody was living the way they did. Let's say that I'll be 55 in October. At what age would be the limit so that someone cannot reverse these biomarkers? I know that you do your researches like between 40 and 65 or 55 mostly.
65, yeah.
65. What is too late to try? Of course, nothing is too late. Of course, always is better to be healthier than what are you now. But like after 40, people should be definitely paying attention to that, or now like someone at 55 years old and just listening to this, okay, what shall I do? Or would it even help to reverse what I did to destroy my system?
Well, first of all, it's a life course approach, and I'll just mention what Singapore is doing briefly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I know. So I would love that.
They just have this their Research Innovation and Enterprise 2030 program is focusing on healthy longevity, and it's 350 million Singapore dollars, which is about 300 million US. And it's targeted toward research that improves the health span of the Singapore population. And so this is fantastic. I think it's the first government really doing this. And the emphasis is not on writing papers, although we need to do that. The emphasis is on developing interventions that we can put into the community to keep this population healthier here in Singapore. Fascinating. I want to see more governments do that. And I think an approach at that level needs to go from cradle to grave. When you have kids growing up one of the things Singapore does is they focus a lot on science and math. They're the best at that. The kids are 2-3 years ahead of the U.S. students equivalent. But they also stress the kids a lot. They put a lot of pressure on them. They're not sleeping that well sometimes. They're not exercising enough. And that can develop bad lifestyle habits. I think we need to focus a lot during youth on how do we get people into good lifestyle habits early in life. Because if you do that, it's much easier to sustain that. If you have people that get to 40 with bad lifestyle habits, then it's much harder for them to change and get back to healthy. Then, when you get into adulthood, I think we have this concept in medicine that we don't need to do anything for people until they have some disease code or they have some chronic disease or some condition. This is crazy. I think doing nothing for people throughout most of their adulthood is harming them. We should be focusing on how do we optimize their health, their long-term health, and also optimize their performance throughout their adulthood. And we might not want to take a lot of risk when someone's in their 30s. We might think about supplements, lifestyle, maybe looking to see if any of their clinical markers are going off early and trying to treat early to get those back optimized, those kinds of things. But ignoring people in their 30s is crazy. It's not how we should be doing healthcare. And then probably we want to ramp up interventions as people get closer to where they get chronic diseases, which is 50 to 70, and try to prevent those diseases as much as possible. Again, put the focus on performance, not just preventing disease. And then, of course, you have to treat disease when people get it. I'm not against that, of course. I don't think there's really, within reason, a timeline on when geroscience interventions can be beneficial. One of the things we saw with AKG, to our surprise, was that the people that were older benefited more. So some interventions, I think, especially ones that are anti-inflammatory, may work better in the older population that already have chronic inflammation that they're dealing with. An anti-inflammatory intervention in a 30-year-old may not be that useful because they don't have a lot of inflammation at that point. But there are maybe other interventions that are much better, during 30s and 40s and don't work as well, when you get to a more of an unhealthy state later in life. Unfortunately, we don't really know the answer to those questions. We need to be doing more clinical studies looking across the age range to see which groups of people benefit more with specific interventions. And I'll add to that as well that there are major sex-specific effects on these interventions, at least in animals. There are some things that work way better in female mice and other things that work way better in male mice. That's probably going to be true in humans too. So we need to look at studies in both sexes because what's optimal for you may not be optimal for me.
I mean, it requires really well-diversified doctors to be able to do such precise work on a patient.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a big ask because, I'm not blaming doctors. They weren't taught anything about aging in medical school. Aging doesn't exist in most medical schools. I can't even understand why. I mean, this is the only thing that happens to everybody that walks into your doctor's office is they're getting older and the doctors aren't taught anything about that. So I don't know that we can expect doctors to suddenly be experts on that. I think we have to give them tools and convince them that this is important to do. And so that's coming back to this biologic aging clock. You measure a bunch of markers in the blood, and these are things people should be measuring anyway. Mm-hmm. And then you give them a risk-adjusted age, and you give them a spreadsheet that says if you move this biomarker, you get 3 or 4 years of benefit. If you move this biomarker, you get 2 years of benefit. So then the doctor can say, hey, I know how to move cholesterol. I know what to do about that. And so you're taking the longevity knowledge and plugging it into their medical knowledge so that it's easy for them to adopt things. I think that's the way to go. And it's really hard to expect doctors that are having 8, 10, 15 minutes with a patient to, completely understand aging and be able to apply that in a personalized way.
I want to share a small thing that happened to my dog, actually, because I have a 9-year-old pug, and I thought he was healthy. I didn't pay attention, his tail dangling and stuff, and I thought there was a problem on his spinal, like either a disc herniation or something. Because I live so healthy and I pay attention to everything, for some reason, it didn't register to me that I have to do the same for my dogs. I don't have kids. So when we went to have an MRI, they had to give some sedation. and they had to test his heart, and they realized that actually the problem was the heart. Heart muscles were not pumping strong enough. And I just then realized, like, okay, now we have to do the same thing for the animals, like we're doing, like the preventative thing. And I turned to the doctor, I said, why are we not measuring the heart markers or doing the AKG and whatever we have to do, like to the dogs? And the answer was, well, because the pet owners doesn't want their chest to be shaved. That's why they just put that out of their list of things to do. Then I just thought that's the same thing for humans, like they don't go to doctors, like you said, before something happens, then it's much more difficult to reverse it.
I mean, I'm willing to shave my chest if I live longer, don't worry. I know what you mean, I'm just joking. Yeah. We should focus on dog aging, and the dogs are, you would probably put a lot of money into keeping your dog healthy a few more years. So there's an economy there. Dogs are great for people, especially older people. Having a dog makes you younger. I think that we should be doing more research and also more development around longevity interventions in dogs and cats.
Let me jump in for a very quick second. If you can hear me right now, we know you're watching Soberhead. But are you subscribed? Could you check it for me? Very honestly, our subscriber count gives us real leverage when it comes to convincing the guests we invite to join the show. So, if you want to keep watching some of the best experts in their field right here, please subscribe to the channel. One last thing that I want to ask, because you work with longevity clinics, you guys are trying to standardize them so that, the interventions would be measurable and mostly science-backed. Yeah, some trials here and there. What is the ideal approach? What is the ideal longevity clinic? Are you pro for the red lights and hyperbaric and so on and so forth that would be helpful? Or you're looking to a totally different area such as plasma exchange therapy, EBO, and whatnot?
I think standardization can mean a lot of different things, and I'm not sure we're ready to standardize completely what clinics do. Like, I don't want to give a clinic a specific protocol they have to do and things they can't do and this, because actually we're all learning as we go. And I think anybody that tells you they know exactly what to do is either lying to you or they're lying to themselves, because I just don't think we have that knowledge. But I do think certain things should be standardized. First of all, we should, whatever you're doing, there should be reasonably good safety data on. If we're taking 40, 50-year-old people that are healthy, we should not be doing things that run major risk for them.
Such as, can you give an example?
Well, like I personally don't think we have enough knowledge of gene therapy that we should be selling that right now. Like there are people doing follistatin and telomerase therapy, and Liz Parrish is a good friend of mine. I like Liz, and I even help her do research on that. But I think that commercially in clinics, I don't feel like there's enough safety for it. But I think so. Safety is one factor. I think the other one is you don't promise what you can't deliver for sure. I don't like clinics that say, come to us, we're going to measure you, we're going to give you a specific strategy, and you're going to get 10 years younger. They don't know that. If it sounds too good to be true right now, it's too good to be true. What they can do is they can say, we're going to promise you transparency. So we're going to offer you a whole range of things. We're going to suggest lifestyle changes, which there's pretty good evidence for. We're going to suggest supplements, which there's good evidence for. We're going to try red light therapy and hyperbaric chambers and other things, stem cells maybe, where the evidence is, there's good conceptually evidence for why it might work, but we don't have enough human evidence to know. If you want to be on the cutting edge and be out in this range, I don't have a problem with that, as long as you're armed with the knowledge to make that decision. If you want to be more conservative and say, I'm going to wait until these other things are more tested, I think that's reasonable too. So the clinics that are being honest with people and transparent, empowering them to make their own decisions as much as possible, those are the ones I like working with, because I think in general they're helping people. And I also think that I'm all for helping people make more of their own health decisions. I think we've taken too many decisions out of the individual's hands, and that's not helping the health of the population.
There's a lot of questions coming about peptides, and I know you also do studies around them. What's your thought about peptides? Some people are against, some people are for. What's your position?
First of all, scientifically, I'm for peptides for sure. I mean, some of the most successful peptides drugs in the world are peptides. And you might have heard of GLP-1 agonists, for instance, insulin. So peptides are active molecules. Your body makes a lot of them, so they do things in your body. They can be very stable in your bloodstream. One of the challenges is you have to often inject them subcutaneously if they don't survive through the gut very well, but that even may change. There's a lot of peptides that have been suggested to affect aspects of aging. I believe some of them might work, but we don't have a lot of data. And so what we're doing right now is using LLMs, or large language models, to screen peptides, prioritize the ones that we think are most likely to affect longevity, and then go back and do the science to validate that they actually work. I wouldn't be surprised if the best longevity drugs are peptides 5 or 10 years from now. And right now, I don't think we know a whole lot. I think that, and there is risk with peptides, especially if you're injecting something. And anytime you're injecting anything, there could be toxins in the liquid that you're injecting, contaminants. Even if the peptide doesn't do anything toxic, whatever else you're putting in your body can be dangerous. So, and I think the biggest concern over peptides right now is the source. Since they're not legal everywhere, and you don't have a lot of big commercial trusted companies producing them, people are getting peptides from all over the place, and it's very hard to validate that they're actually toxin free and what they're supposed to be. So I work with try to collaborate with people that are doing peptides that test their peptides. So if you're going to inject it in somebody's body, you can send it out to places that will determine, to the best of their knowledge, that there's no toxins there and that it's actually the peptide it's supposed to be. So right now, it's just, I think that sourcing is difficult. The data is not complete yet, but I do believe that some of these peptides are likely to be very beneficial.
Are there anyone you can say, like GHK copper or BPC-157 or MOTS is very popular lately, or you're just generally talking about them?
I'm speaking generally, but I think there is good data on BPC-157, also MOTS, and a few others that we're working on. We're still in the process of trying to rank them, so I can't tell you what ranked first yet. But the remarkable thing is that there are 250 different peptides that have been suggested to slow aging. So this is a big field, and yet most of the academics like me have ignored it, and so we want to get in there and really start to understand what's going on. I think things that enhance mitochondrial function, things that limit inflammation, certainly things that affect nutrition or metabolism, all of these things have the potential to slow aging. There are other peptides that may improve cognitive function, and that's very interesting too. So pharmaceutical companies have ignored this space largely because they didn't really believe people wanted to inject themselves all the time. But I take a monoclonal antibody, a PCSK9 inhibitor to reduce my ApoB levels. So I have to inject that every 2 weeks. It's like dummy proof now. They've got it down to a science. You just push it against your skin and press a button. It doesn't even hurt. So I think that was wrong. And people will do injections. They inject GLP-1 all the time. So if we can find things that slow aging, I think it may be some of the most successful drugs in the world. So
one very last question was very interesting to me. What do you mean by the human performance, the gyms and the athletic performance and etc., and longevity merging instead of staying away from each other or as separate entities?
Well, first of all, the clinics, I'm encouraging them to focus not just on health 20 years from now, but on performance now. 80% of what you would do to enhance your performance now overlaps with what you would do for longevity. So why not try to do both? And I think that's good for clinics because a lot of people come to a longevity clinic because they saw a video about aging or something and they're interested. But then they don't come back because, people on the list of things to worry about how my health is going to be 20 years from now is not high on a lot of people's lists. But if you can do things for them that make them sleep better, make them exercise better, make them feel like they're thinking better, they'll keep coming back. So I think it's a good strategy for clinics, first of all. And second of all, we have a lot of data on exercise being healthy, some combination of resistance training, endurance training. So why not merge that with longevity? We should have people do a lot of fitness centers already have like in-body bioimpedance machines in the fitness center. That should be the tip of the iceberg. They should be measuring aging, measuring biologic aging clocks. They would benefit from that, I think. And then clinics should be focusing on exercise or making partnerships with fitness centers, because those two things we have all these sectors right now that are treating themselves independently, but they're all doing similar things. So you have lifestyle medicine, functional medicine, longevity medicine, exercise, physiology. They're all providing overlapping benefits. And so the more we can integrate them, I think we'll all learn from each other.
Dr. Kennedy, thank you very much for your time. This was a wonderful conversation. I think people are going to benefit a lot. I did benefit a lot. And the last part was it made me think, because I know a lot of longevity clinics that don't even bother about the muscle function or fascia or, your cognitive ability. They're just focusing on the cellular part, but then they leave the other part and they don't even tell you what to eat or how to move.
That's the lowest hanging fruit to help people.
Yeah.
If you get people to make changes there, you're already successful in your clinic. Yeah. So I don't understand that either.
I hope to see you again at some point, however we can. And I think you're going to go on with your day, and I'm going to start my day. Thank you so much for this conversation.
We'll go have lunch at Hamdi.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks.